You're listening to the Feral House Podcast, a semi-regular discussion of books with the authors who wrote them.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another edition of the Feral House Podcast. As always, I'm Christina, and I, along with Jessica Parfrey, run Feral House. We are always excited to bring you new books and, again, new conversations with authors. Today, we'll be speaking with Lisa Pease, who wrote the fantastic A Lie Too Big to Fail, right behind me, next to Jim. Originally published in 2018, Lisa has in the past 7 years updated it, and as well as an additional chapter based on new information and new research. As a paperback edition, it's also at a lower price. So now at $29.95 with even more information. Lisa and I say this in the podcast, in our little conversation, but I'm going to say it again too. We love when you can buy our books, but we also love libraries. Know that when you check a book out from the library, it helps us too. So please never feel pressured to say, they always talk about these books I want to read, but I can't afford to buy them right now. That's okay. Go to the library, request them from the library, and they have to bring them in. So that being said, I want to talk about just a couple things that are coming up as we get into October, the spooky season, which is normal for us, as well as rolling into the traditional holiday season. Keep your eyes on the newsletter. There is, of course, a new sale starting, the spooky sale. So some of our scariest titles are on sale this month until November 15th, and then the next sale takes effect. You're going to like the next sale because it's put together with all of you in mind for the holidays, and that's as much as I'm going to tease out for you. Keep your eyes peeled for the podcast or for the newsletter. You can sign up at feralhouse.com if you're not getting the newsletter already. Something that we started doing in the pandemic that we continue to do is a little fun thing of signed book plates. We get all the authors to sign and send me book plates, and they go to the office. And so if you buy a book directly from Feral House, you can get a signed book plate. Make sure you make a note of that you'd like a signed book plate. We have them for most authors. Some of them I think are really incredible. Bill Bainbridge wrote, and he did the new Lucifer's Power book. Incredible. Bill signed some book plates for me. Have you seen Wired for Chaos, the new documentary about Harley Flanagan? You should. It's actually really quite good. And of course, if you haven't read Harley's memoir that we published in 2016, now's a great time to pick it up because you can get a signed Harley book plate. Know that we have signed book plates available for, again, the majority of all of our books, especially for things published from 2020 on. And we are, still working, and I'm contacting some authors and seeing if they can sign book plates for you. In the coming weeks and months, get ready for the holiday season. So with that, I want to thank everybody for your ongoing support. Thank you to everyone who stopped by to say hello to me at the Chicago Printers Row Book Festival and then again at Brooklyn Book Festival. It was so good to meet so many of you. We're kind of done with the book festival season for the year, though you will always find me at Milwaukee, the local Krampusnacht festival, which if you're in the region, I have to say, we do Krampus right. It is an all-day festival. It's December 7th this year on Sunday from about noon until 8 or 9 p.m. All monsters welcome. I can say that it is so much fun. And if you ever were thinking about visiting Milwaukee when it's cold, come to the Krampusnacht Festival because it is a good time, I promise. Plus, it's Milwaukee. We serve drinks. Otherwise, we look forward to seeing you at events, at book events throughout the country, when and where we're able to get there. And if it's not us, if you don't see me, many times our authors are doing book events too. And always feel free to attend those events. They are fun. That's part of it. And book events are free. So again, Thank you for your support as always. And I will stop yammering and bring you Lisa Pease. I've got Lisa Pease here with me today on the Feral House podcast. She is an incredible researcher into the American political history with a focus on, of course, assassinations. She wrote the original 2018 edition of A Lie Too Big to Fail, which we have now expanded and re-released in paperback at a really accessible price for everyone out there. And it contains, of course, the original material, a totally revised index, as well as an updated chapter with a lot more information on some of the new research that Lisa has been working on since its original publication in 2018. Thank you, Lisa, for joining me in this conversation, and we're just going to get right into it and say, so what compelled you to start researching the assassination of RFK?
Well, I'd been working on the Jerry Brown campaign, and I saw how badly the media represented history that I was witnessing firsthand. So it's like I knew the media was lying because I'd been to that event, and it wasn't a handful of people, it was 3,000 people, which in those days, pre-internet, was huge. Political events for years, tiny events. You see Bernie Sanders now, you think that's the standard, or, Trump's big rallies, and, politics has never been that popular. Anyway, so I picked up a couple of books after the campaign ended on the Kennedy assassination. I picked up two on the John Kennedy assassination and one on the Robert Kennedy assassination. I read all three, and I didn't know enough history to know if any of it was true, and it had all these names I'd never heard of, and I didn't know how serious my interest was about to be, but I thought they were interesting. And then the internet went public. My first search was JFK assassination. I found a news group where they were hotly debating the case, jumped in with both feet and was attacked immediately. Like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. And you don't want to tell that to me because I will destroy you. I will come back with so much information. When I know I'm right, there is no end to my ability to make that clear. So anyway, I got kind of sucked into a 5-year discussion, but in the middle of that, one day I was at the library, as I worked downtown in the central library. There was fantastic. And on my lunch hour, I would just walk to the library and pull out some microfilm and read some files, because that's what you do, right? You're weird like me. I thought that was much more fun than having lunch with office people. Anyway,
Absolutely. Well, and that's one of the secrets of all research. I do historical research, different topics, but that is the great secret: is that all of this information is out there. It's living in archives and libraries and file cabinets. And it takes someone like Lisa, it takes someone who has the idea and the tenacious spirit to keep going and to keep digging and putting it together to blow apart what the official story is. So, and that's what you've been doing for so long. And so, what was the thing that shifted your focus from JFK to RFK?
I think it was when I put I was at the library one day, I pulled out a drawer looking for some JFK information, but it was the RFK drawer, and I didn't even know it was there. And these were like 22 reels of microfilm of the LAPD's investigation. And I knew enough to know they'd been released only 4 years earlier, and that there were only, 2 or 3, maybe 4 books on the case total, whereas by that time there were at least a couple of hundred on the JFK case. So I'm like, I had read those other books, and I was about to read the ones I hadn't. But when I put the first reel in, the first thing I learned, I just kind of randomly stopped at a file, and it was a second guy being arrested at the hotel that night. And I'm like, we were always told it was just Sirhan. There was never any other shooter. And the more I researched, I actually found there were at least 2 other people arrested and at least 4 gunmen were seen. I mean, it's an incredible story. And for years, I didn't want to write a book. I've never wanted to write a book. I enjoyed writing articles because they're short and you can kind of start and stop, and it's not the end of your life. And so I put off writing about what I was learning for a long time. And I think it was when some other researcher finally wrote his book on the RFK case, and I read it, and he didn't have the information that I had. And I'm like, damn it, I'm going to have to write my book. So I kind of started and stopped for like 4 years, and I got really serious the last 6 years. And I knew Adam and Feral House from our other book, from the articles I'd written for Probe magazine. And Jim I'm looking for my book there, The Assassinations, which Adam,
Yes.
kindly published. We didn't want to call it the best of because it really pained us some of the articles we left out, but thematically they didn't quite fit. So this is a good chunk.
It's a great book, and that's Adam was such a fan of your work, Lisa, and so respected your skills. And that's one of the things. And just if you're hearing about this book for the first time, The Assassinations, you can go to the Feral House website. It's more difficult to find in print, but I think we've got a few copies at the office. So go to the website.
And what I've learned is you can go to any bookstore and they will order it for you. So if you say, I want a copy of The Assassinations, or I want a copy of A Lie Too Big to Fail, you can support your favorite local bookstore and just let them order it for you. They'll call you when it's ready, or you can have it sent right to your address if you don't want to go back to the bookstore. It's easy now. And if you can't afford it, there are libraries. I would just ask.
I was about to say that. I'm always a big fan of libraries. People might think it's like, oh, I don't have it. But here's the secret. If you ask for a book a few times, or if it's something you really want, have your friends ask the library, put the request in. The library will essentially, they'll bring it in because they're like, hey, people want to read this book, and they're there for us. And so use your libraries, support your local bookstores as best you can. And so we're talking about,
of course, like, Amazon has it, and all the big sellers have it. It's a Noble, of course. Yeah.
You can get Feral House books anywhere.
And there's a Kindle audio. I just wanted to add that too. You can get the Kindle version or the audio version. Anyway, go ahead.
We're trying to get it out for everybody on all formats.
After all that work, I want people to know.
We want people to know too, because this work is so important, and especially in this modern age, there is, I think, a modern notion, a distrust of the government, of the media, and I think that this is an important thing, that we do this independent research, that we trust but verify. And so one of the things that's always fascinating to me, as you were talking about, the official story has that Sirhan was, the lone shooter, but yet there are other people arrested. So, Lisa, can you just remind us real quick, what is the official story of the assassination of RFK?
Yes, it was the night of the California primary. Bobby Kennedy won the primary. He was well positioned to get the entire Democratic nomination. It was the last night of primaries before the convention. So if somebody was going to kill him, this was kind of their last chance before probably increased security. But they didn't guard people with Secret Service agents the way they do now. They started doing that because Bobby was killed while running for president. But at that point, of course, no one knew he was going to be killed. It was a celebratory night at the Ambassador Hotel, which is in Mid-Wilshire in Los Angeles, not far from downtown. By the way, Donald Trump bought the property after that happened and then never did anything with it. So the LAUSD school board took it over, and it's now the Robert F. Kennedy Schools, which is lovely. So, but anyway, so after he gives his, speech, accepting the win, basically, he goes backstage and to the right and through this narrow kitchen area, which nonetheless had at least 77 people in it. I mean, we're talking a place that's like maybe 5 feet wide, 6 feet maybe. I've been in there, and, not very long, just a few yards long. And he stops to shake some busboys' hands. Sirhan steps out, reaches out his hand. One person who saw him do that just assumed he too was trying to shake his hand, and then she saw he had a gun in the hand. And Sirhan fires 2 shots, and Kennedy falls down. And people make the logical assumption, well, Sirhan shot Kennedy. And it's not till years later that we find out, Robert Kennedy was shot from 1 inch behind the right ear, but all the witnesses who saw them both at the moment of the shooting put them in front and put Sirhan and Bobby facing each other with Sirhan's gun muzzle, not even his body, but his gun muzzle 3 feet from Robert Kennedy. So clearly there's no way Sirhan killed Robert Kennedy. And the police went to such great lengths to hide this fact That's literally why I called my book A Lie Too Big to Fail. Because, once you tell the lie that Sirhan was guilty, you have to tell a whole bunch of other lies to prop up that initial lie. And I don't think the LAPD were in on it because if they were, they would have known what to cover up immediately, and they didn't. And that's why we know so much of what we know, is because at first they just took statements and records, and there was a ton of evidence of conspiracy immediately. In fact, Dwayne Wolfer, who was one of the LAPD's criminalists, had gone into the pantry, an hour after the shooting, and he talked about how there were so many bullet holes in the ceiling. Well, later the official count was 3. Now, bear in mind that not only was Bobby shot 4 times, all of them from behind and at almost contact distance. 1 shot went just through his coat, but 3 shots entered his body. 1 shot exited his chest, 1 lodged at the base of his neck, and of course the fatal shot was one that exploded in his brain. Very sad. But 5 other people also had bullets removed from them. And fun fact, and I really had to verify this because it seemed too astonishing even to me and all I know, not one of the bullets from any of those victims were ever matched to Sirhan's gun. Wow. And the LAPD has these incredible explanations for why that was, and none of them hold water. So we don't just have like one magic bullet in this case. We have like, how did 12 bullet points of entry suddenly become 8 bullets? And what about the other 4 bullet holes in the wall that the sheriffs had circled and initialed, which is their standard operating procedure for when they remove a bullet from the wall? That's what they do. They circle and label it. And the FBI photographed 2 bullet holes on one part of the doorframe and 2 bullet holes, I think that was the middle one, in the other part of the doorframe. And they labeled them unequivocally bullet holes. Now, this so disturbed the LAPD that years later, in 1977, right, the event happened in 68. So 9 years later, the LAPD is still worried about that. And so somebody from the county writes the FBI and said, if you had called those possible bullet holes or probable bullet holes, we could wave it away. But since you said bullet holes, should we be looking for another shooter? To my knowledge and to the knowledge of other researchers, if the FBI ever responded, we have never seen that response. Maybe it'll come out in the newly released files. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. So now we've got this scenario. Kennedy is almost instantly killed.
Right. He lives for 26 hours, believe it or not.
26 hours.
They actually put him right into like brain surgery, but they determined there was nothing they could do. He was going to lose all his function, and his body was, already shut.
So let me get it closer. Then is he was never regained consciousness after being shot?
Not much. Yeah, he mumbled a couple of words. He said, "Is everyone okay? Is Paul okay?" And he's like, "Don't move me." When they came to take him to the hospital, because I think he thought he was going to die, and I'm sure he was in so much pain.
Oh God!
And that was kind of it. And then after that, yes, no more consciousness.
Yeah. So it's not one of those like he could point out who shot him, the man standing in front of him with the rubber arms that reached around to the back of his head.
There is a clue that may or may not be important, and that's in the shot of his body lying on the ground. Out by his right outstretched hand, there's a clip-on tie that belonged to the security guard named Thane Eugene Caesar, who was actually standing right to Kennedy's right, and he was literally holding him. And if anybody's a good suspect for having shot Kennedy under the arm twice, because 2 of the shots were right under the arm, how could Sirhan have done that?
And Caesar, what that Thane? That's like a Thomas Pynchon kind of name. I mean,
bizarre.
So what about him? Was he arrested? Was he questioned? He was a security guard.
The hotel knew they didn't have enough security people on staff. And interestingly enough, the guy who ran the hotel's security staff was a former LAPD officer. And he called this other company Ace Security Systems, and they sent some rent-a-guard, over. And Thane Caesar had only joined that company like 3 or 4 days earlier. And in fact, when they asked him for his like company phone number, he's like, "Oh, I don't know, but here's my friend's number. He runs the place." So obviously, he was brought in by somebody who knew him. And yeah, his job had been to keep the pantry free of people like Sirhan. Sirhan was not credentialed. It was a private party. There was a public party downstairs, but the upstairs party where this took place was a private party, and you needed a ticket to get in. And there was a guy who looked a lot like Sirhan, whose name was Michael Wayne. He was the guy who was also apprehended at the hotel that night because he was seen running from the pantry with people chasing him saying, "Stop that man."
Wow.
There's some witnesses who said he was running a gun under a poster or something, and he had collected posters, even had Robert Kennedy sign one of them on his way to give the speech. And it was all unrolled when he was captured afterwards, because there's a photo of him being taken away in handcuffs with this poster now open and unrolled as if it could have been wrapped around a gun. But there's also another witness who thought that two guys collided in the lobby of the hotel, and one of them like handed something off to the other. And so that might have been, who knows? There's so many scenarios, and I talk about several of them in that book. But the thing about Wayne that really stands out is he had been asking for press passes all night. Various people remembered him and thought it was Sirhan because, again, he's a swarthy guy, his similar height, similar age and build, dark curly hair, and people only saw him for, a minute or two. So when they saw Sirhan on TV, when I showed the picture to Munir Sirhan, who is Sirhan's brother and lives here not far from me in Los Angeles, he said, "Oh my God, Lisa," he said, "at first glance, I thought that was Sirhan too. I could see where people would mistake them. He looked really similar." He's like, "Now that I'm looking at it, of course it's not him. But when you first, because it was a big picture and I unrolled it, he's like, when you first put that down for a minute, I thought it was my brother." So obviously there was a resemblance. And the significance of the press passes is because this was supposed to be a secure area, a press pass is like at a concert, an all access pass. With a press pass, you can go anywhere and no one will stop you or question you. And it looked like Michael Wayne was begging press passes to give to the assassination team. And I do say team because it wasn't just Caesar and it wasn't just Sirhan. I think there were at least 4 shooters, and I talk about each one of them and all the witnesses who saw each one of them in the book. And the evidence is so strong that it was a much bigger story. But most people only saw one shooter at a time. And when they talked to the LAPD, they're like, "Yeah, that's Sirhan." So they all thought they had seen Sirhan, even though when they described him, it was like an older guy with a beard and a blue suit and blonde hair in one case. It's like, obviously these weren't all Sirhan.
Yeah. And we know enough now about
Yeah.
psychology and human nature is that, eyewitness accounts aren't always accurate. The human brain is interesting, and especially when it witnesses something so traumatic like an unexpected shooting, that it can, it both creates stories and it hallucinates and it forgets things. And so what we've got, so that's the official story. And we know that there were other folks around. And, I'm not giving anything away, I don't think, is by bringing in like the really rogue actors at this point in the US history, which is, of course, the CIA. And
Yes.
they play a big role in all the American assassination stories.
Yes, they do.
And so how did the CIA find Sirhan, or how did Sirhan find them? I mean, what's the connection there?
Yeah, what's the connection? Well, I think it was through the mind control angle, because if Sirhan is there and he's firing, but none of his bullets match the victims, which was the case, then he had to be firing blanks because he was definitely fired. People saw, like a little flame coming out of the gun. So the gun was fired. But if he was firing blanks, then who would volunteer to be firing blanks while other people were firing bullets? It made no sense. Sirhan was a very, what do I want to say? kind of a passive guy, a very peaceful guy. Munir said he would scoop up a spider and put it outside in the garden. He wasn't a killer. He's not a cold-blooded man like that. But he did change after he had a fall on a horse, and he had studied to be he wanted to be a UN peacemaker, basically UN diplomat. He was studying all the spy languages, Chinese and Russian and German. He already spoke Arabic and English. He might have had a future there, and one of his teachers might have initially pointed him out to the CIA. But he had an older sister who had a terrible slow death from leukemia, and he went to care for her, had to drop out of school. His grades suffered, and he's an immigrant, and he's a small guy without a lot of, skills to his name. So he loved horses. He loved horse racing. So he decided I could be a jockey. And so he went down and, got his license so he could work at Santa Anita. And one of the guys hired him to work with his horses. And he worked his way up from stable boy to hot walker, where you walk the horses to cool them off. And then he got to be the exercise boy. So he's on his way to being a jockey. But one of the horses threw him very badly, and he got injured. And the extent of his injuries was literally an insurance lawsuit because one of his doctors said, oh, he wasn't injured that bad, but Sirhan was definitely having some issues. And in the records, he goes to see doctors like every month for 13 months. Now, if they were only a bruise that needed to be and a little cut that needed to be stitched, as one of his doctors said, then none of that makes sense. But if that's where the CI spotted him and started putting him in their mind control programs, and they had many of them, people always say MK Ultra. Well, that was just one huge batch of mind control programs, but there was also this program called Project Artichoke, where the goal of the program was to find out if somebody of redacted nationality could be made to perform an act of attempted assassination as part of a larger plot. In other words, be made to distract so that something else could be happening, which seems to be what Sirhan was being prepared for. Now, Sirhan had kept these school notebooks, and in them, the prosecution said, look, he wrote RFK must die, RFK must die. Well, if you look at that page, it looks like somebody that's either insane wrote it or somebody who was in hypnosis wrote it, because no normal person repeats things over and over like that. But that is common in hypnosis. They call it automatic writing. If you tell somebody to write something, they will write that and just keep writing that until you tell them to stop. And his own defense team at one point hypnotized him to do that. And that's what happened. They said, will you write RFK must die? And he just started writing it over and over and over until they told him to stop and woke him up. So clearly this is a kid who was really susceptible to hypnosis. So why Sirhan, right? Why was he chosen? Well, I think it's important to note the date, because in the book I talk about an interview I found with E. Howard Hunt, where he said the CIA factors the date into its operations, and it tries to pick dates that have some sort of historical significance. So if you want to think about June 5th, the day of the California primary, technically June 4th, a year before that, that was the start of the Six-Day War between Israel and the Arab nations immediately surrounding it. So if you wanted people to remember that or trigger something like that, what better than to get a Palestinian and say that he did it because he was upset that Kennedy had okayed the sending of bombers to Israel. That's the story that was told. That's the motive that was given him. It kind of doesn't make sense because Bobby was not president. He had no power to approve anything. He was running for president. And I'm not 100% sure he would have approved it had he gotten into office, because both he and his brother were upset that Israel was building a nuclear power plant and a nuclear weapons plant and pretending they weren't. They kept denying that they were, and JFK wanted his brother RFK to get the Israeli lobbyist organization, the forerunner to AIPAC. They tried to get that to register, and of course, Kennedy was killed before that happened, but AIPAC was created to get around that requirement because it's the American Israeli. So
Right.
anyway,
So,
yeah.
so the CIA in that era, that time period, 68, who was running the CIA then?
Yeah, well, Richard Helms was running it. He had been deputy director of plans, which is basically plans. A plan is the blueprint for example, an assassination operation. In fact, Helms's own biographer, sorry, Thomas Powers, called him the gentlemanly planner of assassinations. That was his own label for Richard Helms. And so Helms is at the top, but right under him and running the Israeli desk is James Angleton. And Angleton figures very prominently in the JFK assassination story because it seems like he was running Oswald as what they call a singleton or a vest pocket operation, kind of an off the books agent. So there'd be no official record of Oswald anywhere in the CIA, and yet he's going everywhere the CIA needs him to go. When they thought somebody was leaking secrets, they sent him to the Soviet Union as a dangle because somebody had leaked U2 information and they wanted to know how serious the leak was. And Oswald's basically, oh, I have something of special interest I want to share. So, and he had worked on the U2 program. So he's practically telling him, hey, I can tell you about the U2. And then no one came to interview him. And so that meant they already had a better source. They didn't need Oswald. But anyway, so Angleton's whole story, how he defected, he never defected to the Soviet Union. He went there. It's clear he went there on assignment. When he was coming back, he assumed he could get a military hop. If he had really defected, there's no way even a crazy person would have assumed that.
Right.
And his costs were paid. Yeah, it's an amazing story. So it's interesting that Angleton, if anybody was going to be in charge of the Sirhan angle, it would have been Angleton. And then here's something I found out after even the paperback came out, because I only found this out in the last few months. And
a scoop. Okay.
Guess who at CIA was given the task of controlling what went between the LAPD and the CIA? James Angleton. And I'm not making that up, and it's in the file. And I actually wrote an article, which is published at kennedysandking.com, I think, or if you search Kennedys and King, you'll find it, because the CIA pushed their way into the LAPD's investigation. Not only were they not invited, but when CIA first reached out, they're like, oh, we think we're good. We got the guy. I don't think we're going to need you. And CIA's like, nah, you're going to need us. So that really sounds sinister. And not only are you going to need us, but you have to completely keep our names out of it. You have to keep it so secret. We will only help you if you can keep all our secrets. And yeah. So it's like this story, everything that I wrote in the book keeps being proven more true with the files that are coming out now. And I will be writing about other things I found in those files. Yeah.
So I'm curious then. So what is one point that people have been pushing back on you about?
Yes.
That you just got proven right about in the recent files.
Let's put it this way. The thing people push back the most on is that Sirhan was firing blanks, because that makes it necessarily at least 3 shooters in the pantry. Mm-hmm. And even Paul Schrade's like, well, who was it? If you can't name it, then we have to go with Sirhan. I'm like, just because I can't name who the third shooter was doesn't mean there wasn't a third shooter. I actually named several suspects for that. And I was happy to find, like I said, 7 years later, as I wrote the addendum, that so far no one has disproven that. No one has said, oh, Lisa, you just missed some evidence. Here's the bullet that matched Sirhan's gun. No, they can't, because it's not there. It's not in the record. There's literally no physical evidence linking Sirhan's gun to that crime, except for, people saying, but I saw him stand there, fire a gun. And that's what the very first article I ever wrote on this case, well, the second article, I think, it was called The Grand Illusion, because that's what the magicians call those big things where the magician steps up into the box and is hoisted in the air. And then next thing you know, he's coming through the audience behind you. And you're like, wait a minute, isn't he still in the box? What happened? That's exactly what happened in the pantry. It was staged like a magic act. And I even named the magician that the CIA had on staff at the time. They don't call it the black arts for nothing. They teach them all kinds of sleight of hand tricks and how to set up something to pull focus. And in the addendum, after my book came out, somebody wrote to me and said, Lisa, did you know there was a plot to kill Jimmy Carter where the guy was to fire blanks while two other people shot at him? And I'm like,
Wow.
I have never heard this story before. And so I started looking into it, and it was so interesting I had to write it up. And I'll let people read it, But basically, that was the plan. One guy was to fire blanks, and then two other shooters were to shoot. And obviously, the guy firing blanks was the one that was going to be arrested and hauled to jail. So I think
Right.
of this Charlie Kirk assassination, and I'm not a fan of Charlie Kirk. I'm not in that milieu, but I care if Tyler Robinson did it or not. And if this young kid is being framed for something he didn't do, that's really serious. And I was very sad to see there was no autopsy of Charlie Kirk. But there are videos all over the internet that make it look like the shot came from the side and not the front.
Mhm.
And one of the main reasons I finally sat down to finish my darn book after starting it was, one, I wanted to see if I could help Sirhan get free, but two, I think this is a template that has been used over and over in history. I think it was used in the John Lennon case, and I talk about that in the addendum. I think it was used in other assassinations that I mentioned, and I think it was used in a lot of them I didn't even mention in the book.
Yeah.
But it definitely seemed to be playing out the same way. The kid had no motive. There's these weird writings on the shells, and I'm like, that's something Israel does. They have people sign their weapons. I've never heard of an American signing a bullet shell before. That sounds like something the Israelis would have done. There's just
Yeah,
so many questions.
there are a lot of problems with that narrative, as are, and I'm going to go take that next leap of the so-called attempted assassination of Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania. That one
Yes,
too.
another
We
one.
know so very little about that one as well.
Yeah. And same
Um,
thing, he had no motive. They couldn't figure why he had done that. I'm like, somebody made him a patsy. I think there was a sniper in the water tower who had a much better angle on where Trump got nicked in the ear. Yeah, yeah. And I feel like if people understand the power of hypnosis and mind control and the prevalence of it. And the CIA, of course, told Congress, oh, yeah, we ended MK Ultra back in so and so. Yeah, but they rolled it into new programs. You don't unilaterally disarm, and no one ever went to jail for all the horrific mind control. I mean,
no, not at all.
yeah, they literally drove women out of their mind and tried to completely erase all their memories and build up new memories. I mean, it's just horrific, some of the stuff that was done.
It is absolutely there. I'm going to give you a little something, Lisa. I've
Yeah.
never seen it myself, but I know it exists because I know the person who wrote it. Is
Ah.
that the CIA wrote an unvarnished history of itself that is highly classified and only meant for internal purposes only. And
Ah.
wouldn't we all love to see that
The
particular
Book of
book,
Secrets.
the Book of Secrets?
Just like
So
that film.
we could talk for hours about this
Yeah.
stuff, but I have a few more things I really want to get to as we talk about um, Sirhan Sirhan. You mentioned that one of the goals ultimately is to get that for you. A motive was to get his
I
name cleared and get him out of jail.
get him
He's
out of
still in
jail.
prison, isn't he?
He is. And to his credit, Bobby Kennedy Jr. did write a letter to the parole board, and he appeared at Sirhan's parole hearing with one of his other brothers. And the parole board actually granted Sirhan parole, and then Governor Newsom vetoed it. And it was just so heartbreaking because Munir was so excited because they didn't just jail Sirhan. I mean, they took away the life of that entire family
Mm.
because for the rest of their lives, all they've tried to do is help their brother get out of jail. And, so Munir's whole life has been about Sirhan. And it's just, it's heartbreaking. And I didn't start there because I didn't know if Sirhan had fired bullets or blanks. And I wanted to find out. But once I was confident he had, that's when I knew I had to finish the book because
Yeah.
it's not fair for this guy to be sitting there in jail.
No, and how he's quite old now. I mean, I would think
Yeah,
that
I think
even
he's
for
72. Yeah, he doesn't have a lot left. And I've
right. I
asked
mean,
people to write the parole board and, ask for his release, but you should read my book first so you know what you're doing. And but
yeah,
the parole board doesn't have the power to retry the case. What he really needs is a new trial, and the chance of that happening at this point is so slim. I won't say never because
sure.
wonderful
Stra
things every now and then a miracle happens.
every
And if
now and
there
then.
were a
Well,
trial, he would be freed if there were a fair
that would be
trial.
something is if you're
Yeah.
interested in this, read Lisa's book. And if you're so motivated, write a letter to the California penal, authorities and just let's make noise. That's the only way we as the not CIA people get anything
Yes.
done.
and,
So
and and share it with your friends. And again, I'm not trying to make money off this. I really, for all the years I've spent on this, I've made
no,
pennies on it. But it's important. It's such an important part of our history. Everything that happened in the 60s, the mind control programs are still going on. The patsies are still being set up. And I think you'll learn to recognize, you'll get pattern recognition skills from learning this information.
yeah, and so one of the things that kind of an overarching theme in this conversation and in the book is some of the systemic complicity of
Oh,
governmental and non-governmental associated agencies. Um, who has the most to lose if the actual truth comes out?
It's well, if the actual truth came out, I think the CIA would have a lot to lose, but the LAPD would have a lot to lose too, because they clearly framed Sirhan and they knew they were framing Sirhan. There are internal memos that show they know there's a problem. It's always in hedged language. Although at one point, and in the addendum, I added this, the district attorney at one point said, it's kind of stunning that no one has come forward to make a name for himself and to argue that Sirhan was an innocent. A DA, a sitting DA, actually said that. He was dead within a year because he was an alcoholic, evidently. But it's they knew
Hey fiends, thanks for listening to the Feral House podcast. We do this about once a month, talking to Feral House and Process Media writers, as well as members of the extended Feral family. You're part of the family. Let us know if you have any questions or if you have an idea of someone we should talk to. You can send me a note at press@feralhouse.com, PRESS @feralhouse.com.
It's the wondrous world